Hello everyone, welcome to Channels, the Nextflow podcast. My name is Phil Ewels and I'm speaking to you from Sweden. We have got a very special episode for you today because Nextflow has just turned 10 years old. To celebrate and reflect on the past 10 years, I've got two guests here for you today, Paolo, Tommaso and Evan Floden, and they're going to talk to us about Nextflow and the road that led us here. So sit back and get ready to channel some Nextflow love. Hi guys, thank you for joining me tonight. It's great to have you both on.
Amazing. Nice to meet you. Yeah, fantastic. Incredible presentation. You are very professional. I was not expecting something like that.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
Yeah, no, really.
It's the first time we've got you guys onto this new Channels podcast, so it's good to kick it off like this.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Yeah, I saw the 10 years and I saw the photos of both of us, and I wasn't sure who had aged more. Maybe I have to see that later on.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a line of questioning I want to pursue. Right. So anyway, I thought we get the three of us together and we can have a quick chat and trip down memory lane about Nextflow. Try and get some inner gossip on what it was like in the early days and things, and try and give a flavour for how we got here today. So just as a quick introduction for anyone who's listening, who's maybe a little bit newer to the community, do you want to just quickly give yourselves a 10-second introduction and why I've invited you here today? Paolo, do you want to kick us off?
I'm Paolo. Yeah, I'm Paolo. I am CTO of Secure Labs and creator of Nextflow. Spent last 10 years working this project. So, okay, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Nextflow, absolutely. I'm Evan Floden, CEO, co-founder of Secure Labs, and yes, I started my PhD in the lab, and I found some handsome chap beside me who had just started a project called Nextflow and sucked me in from there.
Awesome. And for any listeners who haven't listened to this before, my name is Phil Ewels. I also work at Secure Labs and co-founded the NF Core community, which is obviously part of a whole Nextflow ecosystem. So let's start off at the beginning. 10 years ago today, Paolo, you hit git commit for the first time in Nextflow. You set up that repository. But what I don't know, and I think probably most people don't know, is for me, you are Nextflow. I imagine you sort of popping into this world with a shaved head, little beard, and carrying a laptop with a Nextflow sticker on it. But what was before Nextflow for you? Can you give us a background?
Yeah, for me, okay, I was working already CRG, but previous that, I was software engineer, computer scientist. I worked in different contexts. I worked back in telco. And then at some point I was getting a bit bored. I was seeing that I was not happy in the work I was doing. I tried to move something different, no profit organization. At that time, I think the last time before I moved into science, I was working FIU, with the agriculture organization in the nation. But still, I was finding not having impact. I was not creating what I was doing. So at some point, I decided to make master bioinformatics, and then there were this career change for me, and then where I arrived to Center for Genomic Regulation, I started to work into bioinformatics field. So essentially, okay, before Nextflow, I was working as a software engineer, different field, and trying to find my way.
You're Italian originally, right? So how long were you in Spain?
Yeah.
What brought you to Spain in the first place?
Well, essentially, I moved to Spain to start working at Center for Genomic Regulation. That was the main motivation. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. And Evan, how about you? What was your life like before Nextflow?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was definitely some parallels with regards to coming to Barcelona, primarily for CIG and to do my PhD there. My background was much more from biology side, so I did biotech in college in New Zealand. Spent some time in a biotech and in a company there, which was really interesting. So I saw the impact you could have, but also saw biology was becoming really digital, and that kind of really pushed me to want to study bioinformatics, move to Europe to do that. And then eventually found myself doing a PhD in Barcelona, where I guess I met Paolo and kicked everything off.
So your PhD was pure bioinformatics as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lab that Paolo and myself were in, the Notre Dame lab in CIG, was mostly focused on multiple sequence alignment, and it's really one of the, I guess, the kickoff projects for Nextflow. There was some work that had gone on. Paolo can maybe describe it slightly better than me, but it was essentially cloud coffee, which was trying to do multiple sequence alignment in the cloud before people knew what the cloud was, and it kicked things off there. I think maybe Paolo can jump in a little bit more on that one.
Yeah, okay, that was the early day of cloud. It was 2010 when I joined the lab. So I think Amazon has been go public in 2007. Well, okay, was the first year in where there was this idea to run stuff in the cloud, but that time cloud was just running a virtual machine into Amazon infrastructure. So if you were able to launch a VM, so you were very proud and do something very sophisticated. This idea of cloud coffee was just running eCoffee sequence aligner into the cloud. The only in the cloud that was just virtual machine, but the only point that was we were doing some benchmarking how much it was costing compared using different virtual machine, how was costing the sequence alignment compared to also running locally. So there was somehow this idea of cost. There was something bit new compared to infrastructure at that time, because the infrastructure was just running something on your computer on the institute in infra. So was not much about costing at that time. So, but the only thing very new maybe at that point.
And T-Coffee is a piece of software that came out of your lab, like your Cedric Notre Dame's lab. So, so that'd been around for a while, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And was there like other pieces of software what led you to Nextflow? I mean, were you trying other tools and they didn't fit, or was there just no other tool available to do what you wanted it to do?
Well, no, actually, I was into the lab to try, to working around this idea to move computation in the cloud, even though there was not a clear idea what to do. So I tried different things before Nextflow. Most of them was big failure. No, really. I think some of them are still around on GitHub, maybe. But maybe at the beginning was some of the more similar, let's say Terraform or Chef or these tools that orchestrate the configuration of virtual machine in the cloud. But it was very hard thing to implement. And then at some point, maybe I tried something more related to Hadoop, MapReduce. That time there was a lot of talking about MapReduce algorithm that Google was somehow made public that we're using, because the algorithm is very old. Also, that was a big failure. So for a lot of time was a lot of frustration, because it was very difficult to enter into the bioinformatics way of doing things. And then I think the turning point was when I understood really how bioinformatician people work. So this idea to use just command line tools and to write pipeline, that at the beginning was very weird. It was resisting to the of this way of working. And so at some point I realized that, okay, maybe we just need to take the best of this approach and try to build around. And that was then the very beginning of Nextflow idea to try to accommodate the way bioinformaticians work, but try to scale in the cloud without breaking their experience, the way of writing pipeline, essentially.
I think there's something to be said for that. But for people using Nextflow, often come from this bioinformatics background. They're used to running command line tools, and they don't have to change the way they work. It's an addition to that workflow.
And that was my own experience as well, is really coming at it from being, user number one, coming through, realizing how it's going to change the way that you work, like the efficiencies that come at. I think there was also a strong driver of the fact that it was really a problem that we needed to solve in the lab. It was real problems that we were running into every day, and it was basically being how to have this almost like having a customer and having someone developing, and then just having that tandem that you can go back and forward get the development of, and I think open source plays a big part in that as well, because as soon as you put the stuff out there, people start using it, people start trying it, people break it, and everything kind of begins from there with regards to the development as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of dog fooding, sometimes called, right? Kind of,
Absolutely.
using your own software as your best critic and best user. It's quite interesting you saying that cloud is in there. I confess, I checked the data that first commit, but I didn't spend very long looking at the code. So was it cloud native? Because most bioinformatics tools are kind of similar to Nextflow. I think started off with a pedigree of HPC and then later kind of got cloud bolted on. But from what I understand from what you're saying there, Nextflow started off as cloud first. How did that relationship start?
Yeah, so somehow with the idea, even though HPC and cloud are really two very different beasts, and still nowadays there is a big discussion about the convergence, about these two worlds that are very different. So this is still an open problem. There is a lot of work into this direction. But yes, Nextflow was thought exactly with this idea to be cloud first, even though paradoxically, I think for quite a lot of time was not cloud at all. So because just the beginning was only working on local computer, on-prem cluster like Green Engines, Learn, this kind of stuff. Even though I always think that the idea was to make it possible to easily migrate the computation into the cloud. So there are some key points and key ideas that was not possible to implement that time, but with the idea to make it possible at some point. And
there's some key model points where you're describing essentially each task works in its own working directory, which is kind of like, if you think about distributed compute, helps a lot. It obviously helps a lot with regards to the containerization as well, by thinking about tasks like that. Those kind of points, which I think that there was like some foresight in terms of where we were going. This predated things like AWS Batch by 3 years, the introduction of Docker containers, for example. And that's kind of where the world has ended up, at least with regards to most containerized compute. And I think it's little decisions like that were made early on, which have really led to a lot of the success of Nextflow. I don't know how much of it is luck and how much of it is foresight.
Standing here, you can say it was genius.
Exactly.
You touched on something I wanted to ask about there, though. Docker containers. I mean, when Docker was a pretty new technology when you were starting on Nextflow. I mean, I don't think many people had heard of it by then.
Because Docker was launched in 2013. Or containering exists before that, but I think very few people know about. And when the project was started, I didn't know about container. But I remember quite clearly that when there was the announcement and the release of Docker, the famous presentation of Solomon Hykes, the creator of Docker, they made that presentation about the use of container. I saw on YouTube say, wow, this is fantastic. This solved a lot of problems. And was a perfect match for what we were doing also in the model used by Nextflow, because Nextflow, each task ran a single job into a separate path, work directory, with the idea that a task is a function. So there is no side effect, there is no state to maintain. That they exactly the same how the idea of the container are ephemeral, because they run just a job without maintaining the state in the file system. So it was really a nice match. And I gave a try, and it was working fine. At the beginning, there were quite a lot of limitation about permission, different way, but the model fit very well what Nextflow was doing. So was really another key point to make this popular, this technology popular, because at that time, yes, there were, I think, very few tools using container for that analysis computation.
I remember when I started using Nextflow, we used the environment module system for all the software, which I loved about Nextflow. I mean, you could start using Nextflow with whatever you're used to, which was HPC and environment modules for us. Yeah. And that was sort of the gateway for us to get into containers and eventually cloud. And I think it was a real game changer. I mean, maybe that wave was coming anyway, but when I look back at how we used to handle software dependencies now, I can't imagine
And modern frameworks like this, you build once and then you can deploy it anywhere. And we start to see these patterns happen more and more, even like things like web development and development of software generally. I think it fits really well.
So, I mean, you're both obviously keen advocates of open source, and from as far as I can tell, this project kind of started off on GitHub and everything. But tell us a bit more about that side of things. Like, how important has the open source aspect of Nextflow been to the project?
Paramount was another pillar, because if Nextflow were not open source, was just a project, project into the lab, nobody would knew about that. So yeah, all the visibility on Nextflow, I came definitely from outside my group that I was working that time. So I decided, I not even remember why, but maybe because I like just to work on GitHub to make public project. So I decided to make it public. And then at some point, some people start to comment, to open issue, to reply, little by little, gain visibility. I start to create a community around that. And that was a kind of positive spiral, how to say that, was incrementing by itself and really gain a lot of visibility at some point.
It's very multifaceted, is the whole way of open source. You can think about it in many different ways. Like, there is the distribution point that you mentioned before, but then there's also like the contribution. Like, people try out like everything that you build, and you do get feedback in a way which you couldn't do if you had something which was entirely closed off. I think there's also an element related to like almost the libertarianism of scientists, and like the way that open science has become such a key part. Nextflow is open source, but for me, almost what's more important is it's enabled the open source pipelines, the things like NF Core to have developed, and they're slightly on slightly different levels there in terms of like the open source piece, and that there's some have been developed by people who are low level Nextflow developers, where others folks are people like me who are drawn to it because I can put my pipelines on GitHub and share it with a collaborator around the world. I guess that's something that drew you in a lot as well, Phil, and probably some of the origins of NF Core on that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background, I wasn't user number one like you, Evan, but we came in sort of fairly early. Maybe the project's been around for 3 years or so, something like that. And I mean, I've been using workflows for a while. I remember starting off back in Cambridge, we sent out email lists to the Bioinfo Core mailing lists of all over the world asking what other people were using, and everyone had their own homebrew solution. There was a few kicking around. There was like some from Ensemble where you needed to create a huge infrastructure in order to be able to just run the pipeline. There was bpipe and some others, and I wrote one, but none of them really had that portability that you're talking about, where other people could easily run the same workflow. That just didn't exist before Nextflow. I never saw it.
We can summarize that Nextflow were not open source, it would never be existed, because this is the point. Because the power of open source is that you create a community of people that share the same problem and collaborate together. Maybe they collaborate in different way, not just coding, but maybe just sharing problem, asking questions, and finding solutions. So this is the power, the tool. You transform a technical problem in a social relationship, in some extent, no?
And it took a long time. I mean, you saw that with NF Core. It took a long time for people to change their mindsets and their approaches, because everyone is used to having to write their own pipeline. And so, I mean, when Nextflow was young, everyone was writing their own RNA-seq pipeline and their own copies of the same things, because everyone was used to writing pipelines for themselves. And then I think it was a real kind of seismic shift, really, to think, oh, actually, we can just collaborate on the same code base. But how immediate? I mean, you said that other people sort of started making issues and stuff. How immediate was the sort of the feedback that this could be good? I mean, were people in your lab super excited? Like, what was the first demo? Was it kind of like exploding heads, or was everyone
true?
taking
I don't remember. We should check some issue into GitHub, but at the beginning was rarely. There were from time to time maybe somebody posting a question, but maybe the very first one after months, if not 1 year or something like that. Maybe some months. I will check, but was not so frequent.
And I think there's this thing that these good things do take time. If we if we kind of track Nextflow usage over time, like it's like an organic thing. It really just like grows from word of mouth from folks using it. And I think that's the thing by Paolo and like just by kind of committing to it for such a long period of time, it's really led to that piece. And I think that's something which is kind of hard, not so often to see, but it's kind of something which I really kind of strongly believe in, that this kind of commitment to something really can help a lot.
And last question before we kind of move on a bit, but I mean, Nextflow I think has always had a fairly strong identity from the start. You've got the name, the logo, and the website, which hasn't really changed as far as I know.
The green,
kind of 10 years. The green, exactly. Like, what was the original? Was that all kind of a conscious decision at the start, or was it a happy accident, or
Well, essentially, it was to have a simple name to communicate about this project. I don't remember the real reason why, but I remember that I was sure that it was needed to have a simple way, to communicate about the project and to find a simple name that was catchy. So this idea to have Nextflow, Next that came from next sequencing technology, the main driver of the pipeline for which Nextflow are written. And the logo was just because I had a friend that was a good graphical designer. I had some chat with the guy, and I made that nice logo. It worked pretty well.
Nice. So we've got a lot to thank him for.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a step forward. You guys have been kind of working on Nextflow in your lab with the other lab members, and we're starting to get some kind of community uptake. So obviously, at some point, it started to get big, and Nextflow sort of started to really take up a significant chunk of your lives, and sort of started to kind of, things started to open up opportunities. Tell us about that phase. What was it like? When did you realize that this could be more than just a piece of open source software that you contribute to in your spare time?
Well, when we start to see that there were a lot of feedback from the community, especially from people working in the industry, so they were asking for support, asking for new features. So it became really not anymore a side job or hobby job into the lab, but something they were taking a lot of time. This was started to become a serious project. Also, when we published this work into Nature, biotech was quite interesting and impacting paper. So that was also a turning point into the visibility of the project and transforming something bigger.
I just thought, like from my own perspective, I just fell in love with the technology. I said my PhD was mostly on multiple sequence alignment, and I kind of I was using Nextflow to solve those problems, but it became more and more like kind of a key driver for me. It kind of almost got to also perspective of like, okay, I want to put this into as many people's hands as possible. Like, I want everyone else to have that aha moment where you're like, spam the cluster and the HPC rings you up and hey, stop doing that. Okay, again, as many people to feel that, because it's very powerful once you kind of see that working. So like having that and seeing that like it was affecting other people, and there was like stuff that I think we can do, and to work on that full time to make that happen.
I think that's a feeling that never gets old. I remember feeling it with like 100 jobs, but you still see people posting on Twitter all the time. But now it's like 30,000 jobs or something. The scale has increased, but the feeling's still there. So then, what was the first step? I mean, like you guys obviously worked very closely together. Like whose idea was it to kind of try and spin this into something outside of academia or alongside?
I'm not sure. I think like we were there was just kind of like some long-term plan. So I think we were a little bit naive as to exactly how the thing would play out. We started with training, and we were just like traveling around Europe. This is like in the pre-COVID days, and living out of the back of it like a a car or a suitcase, but it wasn't quite that unglamorous. But it was really traveling around doing training for quite a few academic things. That was also great because it got us to meet the community like face to face, and it allowed Nextflow to grow, I think, on that kind of more face to face perspective. Doing that is not always easy, and it's not always necessarily like the way that you can build something massive. And that's kind of what led us to thinking about Secura Labs and trying to formalize everything around Nextflow. And that started sort of late 2017 and sort of early 2018 and kicked that off.
I still remember the Nextflow meeting when you guys announced the formation of Secura. There was a lot of buzz. It was really exciting talk. Sorry, Paolo.
Yeah, and the other driver was also that it was not possible anymore to keep it the pace with the requests from the users, from the people, because because the requests were much bigger what we could do independently as a developer. So yes, research into a research lab. So they start to ask UI, management console, services. So the amount of requests came in from the community was so big that at some point the only possible to deliver this, to make it possible, was to create an organization, yes, like we have done to work on full time on this project with other people to make it possible, this new level or possibility that the project was promising.
And you started off with training, but was Nextflow Tower kind of always part of the idea for the company?
There's definitely like a pull. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, even now, there's probably 15 or 20 folks who have built clones or maybe clones of doing very much a similar thing. So the problem itself is very well defined and very generalizable in terms of providing almost like control plane for those pipelines. What we've seen we'll be able to do, I guess, is like take it to the next level and start to do stuff that we didn't think, initially when we thought around just monitoring of workflows or even just the execution of those. And there's some stuff you can't do with a command line tool. But it's still, I guess, all done in the same vein of like allowing people to use their own infrastructure, of trying to be as open as possible about it, allow them to collaborate. Like many of the same principles are there, which we really try and strive to.
And kind of standing now, I mean, Secura is, I should know this, how many years old now? 5 years old?
Yeah.
So Secura is half as old as Nextflow itself, and scaling fast as Nextflow continues to scale. I mean, kind of looking back now where you are, is there anything you'd do differently if you had to do it all again, both for Nextflow and for kind of Secura Labs?
Wow. No, maybe no. I think you can change many things in life, but why you should that young? I think.
I confess that the wording for this stems from a community question. I asked if there are any questions, and the question actually read, "What would you do differently with Nextflow now, and why Python?"
Exactly. Yeah, why Groovy not? Why not Python? Well. Once because big part Java machine makes part of my background, so I was quite strong on that environment. Also because looking for alternative possible implementation. I remember I was working with another workflow engine that is bpipe. It was written in Ruby. And then some legacy of Nextflow came also from the experience with bpipe and from the part that was written in Ruby. So some part from that was a part of the reason. Also because looking for solution, I remember there was a fantastic parallelization library that is still at the core on Nextflow. That also was written in Ruby, and from where was taken some core algorithm that make it possible, the implementation, the data flow paradigm that was behind Nextflow. So it's a matter of fact that Nextflow exists because also exists Ruby and not Python. Maybe, I don't know, having a Python would bring a completely different experience at this point, but who knows?
And how about I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to pin that on you, but I know it's not your favorite question. I think, I mean, the success of the implementation of Nextflow speaks for itself, so I don't think anyone can hold too many grudges. Is there anything else where you kind of kicked yourself about how things were done, or maybe you think there would have been a better way to approach a problem or strategy?
I'll spin it around on Paolo, and I'll say like, I think it's incredible the way that DSL2 has evolved, and how you can go from a syntax which can be in some way monolithic. And there was a lot. I remember the first PhD meeting that I had, and I presented Nextflow, and the person from CIG was like, but how are you going to modularize it? How are you going to think? And to the credit of Nextflow, like over the years, worked on that program, rolled it out very, very slowly. There was not too much disruption. People got on board. And if you're changing something as fundamental as the core syntax of these workflows that people have spent so much time on, the fact that we deprecated it, I don't know how long ago, like probably 2 months or something, after 10 years of this thing, I think it's a great example of how you can like evolve, and whilst at the same time, keep this. So it's like not so much a regret, but it's this kind of thing that you can make changes to stuff, and like you can fix things, and folks will, for the most part, if you explain it well and you keep them along for the ride, they'll stay with you.
Yeah, indeed. I think this also was an important principle idea in the project. Try to not break things for people using it, because otherwise, if you break things during new version, new release to make new stuff, you destroy the experience. So you destroy your community. So this was very important to keep the possibility to this evolutionary approach into the language. Yes, the DSL2 was also an interesting, nice turning point. I still remember that I released a lot of time before change the previous model, in which all the stuff were actually a huge big script, but also because one initial idea was to make this pipeline more transparent. No, the idea was to make it possible that you see immediately what was happening into the pipeline script without hiding the different components. But at some point, it wasn't possible to allow the pipeline to grow, because it was impossible to create a huge script with those on different tasks. So it was inevitable to have the possibility to write modules, composable task. But yes, I agree. That was a nice way how we managed to transform to evolve the language from single script to a modular way. Continue to maintain the same model behind, but at the same time provide a completely different way to compose the task.
I still remember I invited you out to Sweden years ago now, Paolo, for a talk, and I can remember walking through some of the pipeline code. I think NF Core was underway by then, but showing you some pipelines which were like 12,000 lines of code in main.nf, and just sort of seeing your face. I think it's definitely an improvement. And
it's still a little bit shocked when he's in.
Yeah. It's had a huge impact on NF Core, of course. It's completely changed the way we work. And again, I mean, these Nextflow meetings were real kind of highlights for me. And I remember you presenting DSL2 and talking about modules, and us going off to I think it was the cooking class afterwards. And it was me and Harshaw and Alex and Maxime, and it was kind of a bunch of us from the core NF Core team. And we were just thinking through all the implications of what this was going to bring. And then that was pretty much the next 3 years. It was actually making it a reality. Huge impact. So, I mean, you're well embedded in the community. The community kind of grew around the two of you in the early days, and it's been a core selling point, or a really key aspect of Nextflow. Do you have any sort of favorite anecdotes or stories from kind of people things that people have done with Nextflow that maybe surprised you or you're particularly proud of?
When I look at now what the folks are doing, whether that's in population genomics, screening, tens of thousands of people every day with Nextflow pipelines, that kind of blows my mind a little bit. some of the applications on personalized medicine, when I hear about them and the impact that they're having, I'm kind of, it's like, I guess it's the kind of reason you get into this stuff, but you don't actually think it will come true. It's just something, the stories you tell yourself. But then when you hear it from, particularly the users' words, but within the users, obviously, they're saying it on behalf of the patients. That for me, always gets me very excited and keeps you driving on. I think it's also like we've got a company, but at the same time, what drives most of the folks in the company and what drives most of the thing is really the impact that you have, and you can have a really outsized impact with an open source project like Nextflow, something which you don't get from most jobs. I would say for the most part, particularly in sort of industry sector.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's very rewarding to see how this project start from a research project into a lab and widely adopted into industry, research, academia, research institute. But for me personally, I think one of the most rewarding things when you meet these people in the minute that you find them on Slack or on Twitter, something like this, that tells you, okay, next to change my career, next to change the way I work, next to help me doing this and that. I super beautiful because you really feel that you're doing something that helping other people in concrete work, concrete task.
Yeah, I mean, not many projects I think you can claim to have started off in quite far from kind of this kind of impacts and clinical use and everything, where tea coffee is very academic, multiple sequence alignment. It's like very kind of academic blue sky research stuff, and then really reaching out everywhere since then, having real life impacts on 1 million. I mean, if you look at how it was used in COVID and stuff, I mean, it's impacted millions of lives now. I think it's sort of like not an exaggeration to say that. Pretty cool. So 10 years. Are we going to have this meeting again in another 10 years' time? What are we going to talk about? What does the future bring? What are you most excited about?
Possible question.
Just getting started. No?
Maybe. I hope that we are going to meet next 10 years, but what we are going to talk about, I have absolutely no idea.
I mean, for me, it's like trying to balance this thing and getting it right between that magical experience that any new bioinformatician, any new developer, any new person trying to analyze data can get, with some of the more like advanced features that we're working on at the moment that we're going to be developing. Things like that, like data provenance. How can we provide this way where we know exactly how things are going to go from one state to another? Provide this in a way where we can say still get that experience without complicating the language, without complicating the syntax, and also while staying relevant for other folks. There's a lot of different frameworks out there at the moment. Obviously, Nextflow is doing great in bioinformatics space, but who knows? Maybe we'll be all talking about machine learning in 10 years and the impact that Nextflow's had there, and this is really just the precursor to that. So I don't discount any of those things when I think about the Nextflow evolution.
And Paolo, when are you going to hit us with DSL3?
Well, yeah, this can be a serious topic. There is some ideas around that. Maybe not in short term. We want to first clean up a bit what there is now, make a bit more stable, especially on the error reporting point of view, this kind of stuff. But yeah, there are some ideas to next evolution on the DSL. Definitely one idea could be to have a more static type of version of the language. Now is complete scripting language that is resolved at runtime, and this create a lot of problems. Will give you a lot of flexibility when you want to write pipeline, but also when the pipeline tends to grow, you want to write some tests, it become very, very complex. So there are some ideas to have a static compiled version of the DSL to reduce or to move some checks when you compile essentially the script instead of runtime. That can be an interesting evolution on the language. Also, we are thinking some kind of interoperability with Python. Oops, maybe I should not. But yeah, this is something we are exploring soon to have the possibility to have some part of the DSL maybe accommodating the requests from Python users, so that is more familiar from there for them. But okay, still too early to have something concrete that could be DSL3. Yeah.
I just heard the echo of 1,000 people dropping their coffee cups all around the world then. You heard it here first, folks.
And also, another important thing is that there's like the way that Nextflow integrates. If you think about like last year, we launched with Google Badge. Google Badge didn't exist until last year. So there is this constant evolution of all the things that Nextflow is interacting with, and Nextflow is and somehow enabling those technologies or enabling folks to write their pipelines and run on those technologies. I think that's a really important point if we think about the container engines, the container runtimes that Nextflow works with. It's constantly evolving with all of this stuff. So there's like a syntax kind of like core evolution of Nextflow, and then there's all of the stuff that Nextflow is kind of enabling and building on top of, which I think help. And then the whole community aspect, which really continues to grow. I think maybe Phil, you can share with us a little bit on the training that happened last week. Nextflow is 10 years old, and it's definitely not becoming less popular.
Yeah, it was a little birthday present for the community last week was the online training. I mean, we started doing this kind of free online training properly last year, where just anyone could tune in, and you know, in previous hackathons and events we'd had like 150, 200 people kind of turning up. So I thought, well, maybe we'll be lucky if we get 300 people sign up. And then last October we had, I think it was over 800 people sign up, which completely threw everything out the window. We had to rethink how to do it. And I thought, well, surely there's a plateau of how many people are interested in doing training. But last week we hit 1,340 registrations, I think, which is just phenomenal.
I'm blown away, like a project 10 years old that just like it continues to scale and scale. It's it kind of blows your expectations when you think about stuff. But it's, I mean, I guess that's like the nature of kind of organic growth, is it just builds on itself and compounds.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying the other day, I keep kind of waiting for the plateau to come, and it shows no sign of slowing down yet. To the extent that even the NF Core stats page, which has all these graphs, refuses to load. It's just like too many users.
Are you blaming that or your PHP skills?
All right, less said about that, the better. Yeah, no, pretty phenomenal stuff. Great. All right. Well, I think we should wrap up. We've gone a bit over time, but been fascinating for me. So I'm sure everyone listening will agree on that front. It's not an easy task getting the two of you sat in a meeting at the same time. So I appreciate coming to talk to me today. And yeah, many congratulations again on this massive milestone for the project. Huge kudos.
No, thanks so much, Phil. I really appreciate all your impact on the community. It's as much yours as it is ours as well. And so really appreciate everything.
Definitely. And of course, it's a big piece on this story. So
it's maybe cliche to say, but I feel like it belongs to all of us, really.
Exactly.
Joy of open source. Right. On that note, I think we'll wrap it up and say thanks very much, and hope you tune in soon for the next episode of Channels Podcast.
Okay, thanks so much, folks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See you 2033.